Thank you, Derval. And I'm not sure whether to thank you or not. I'm following three academics here, me who knows nothing about nothing. And the only thing is I can say, the issues that are being talked about today, I've never studied any of them, but I've lived them. I have lived them. So I'm going to share some of my thoughts around that. When I was a child, I loved the July fortnight. I would stare up at the red, white and blue bunting which was draped across the streets. It was colourful and festive, and it brightened up the dull red brickwork. And because it appeared at holiday time, I just always connected it with the joy and the freedom of summer. And as soon as school was finished in June, I would join the other children of the area, gathering wood and furniture for the bonfire. And for those few weeks in July, the boney became the centre of our lives. We would collect for it, build it, guard it, and then on the 11th night, it would be set alight. And we would watch with wonder as the flames would shoot into the dark summer sky. It was a time of excitement when nobody called you in for bed, and you could stay out for as long as you wanted. The 11th night was second only to Christmas Eve. Nowadays, I go away to avoid it. I hate to see the paramilitary flags which litter the streets, symbols of our recent violent history, which are erected with the consent of no one and to the annoyance of many, and which, despite promises of protocols, continue to hang from lampposts all year round in ragged, washed-out rats' tails of cloth. Each year, they remind communities of the powerlessness of government and police, as residents are forced to cohabit with green, white and orange or red, white and blue flags and banners. There'll be trouble if we take them down. If we take one down, they'll only put up another 100. Those are the usual excuses that are used and which confirm who is really in charge. Some years ago, my husband Brian shared a story with me about his childhood memories of the 12th, and he, like me, were both from the Newtonards Road. He said there was a woman in their street who every year let them keep their wood in her backyard. She wasn't like the other adults in the street. She didn't chase them. She didn't give off about the mess. But it was only years later that my husband made sense of why this particular neighbour had let a group of noisy kids bring all their precious wood and pile it into her yard. She was a Catholic, and she was afraid to refuse. It was her way of keeping herself safe and free from intimidation during the July fortnight. And I suppose that's the issue that I have with it all now. As a child, I didn't understand the message behind the flag waving. But as I grew up, I accepted, I suppose it's just a normal part of the 12th, the anti-Catholic and anti-Irish mantra, which unfortunately many, not all, but many seem to regard as an integral part of their cultural celebrations. And I remember almost 20 years ago now working on the Shankill, doing art and craft as part of a summer scheme for kids. And we were doing this 70s theme, so it was all glam rock and platform shoes. But everything the kids did had to be red, white and blue. And one day we got talking about how it was okay to celebrate your own culture, but it wasn't okay, and it wasn't necessary to attack someone else in order to do that. And unfortunately, I think many adults in Northern Ireland haven't learnt that yet. What is it about the Northern Ireland psyche that being for something makes you vehemently opposed to something else or somebody else? And my own background, I suppose, is not typical. As though I'm a working class Protestant from East Belfast, my family were left-wing communists, not unionists. And I'm also aware that because of my religion and the area that I'm from, and because of who my husband is, that many people place me into a certain box. They've worked out who I am and how I vote and what I stand for. and that infuriates me. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own background. On my mother's side, and my mother was from North Belfast, from the Crumlin Road, my grandfather was a Presbyterian with a very Irish name, and my grandmother was a Catholic. On my father's side, my grandfather was English, and he married my grandmother after he came to Belfast in the 1930s. My father's parents were members of the Communist Party, and this had varying degrees of influence on their 5 sons. The eldest, Michael, left home early and travelled the world. My father, Terry, became a strong trade unionist and a member of the Communist Party. Brian, the next one, he joined the British Army, while Robert joined the UDA. And the youngest, Barry, also joined the Communist Party. So what does that make me? One of my uncles married a girl from the Short Strand, so my cousins and myself grew up on opposite sides of the interface. And when people talk to me about them's and the Fenians, they were talking about members of my family. Over the last few years since I started to learn Irish, I find that I mix a lot more with people who are Catholic. I've made many new friends, and I've ended up in places and areas I'd never been before. And I've become even more frustrated and exasperated by the sectarianism that still exists within our society. And also, since I started learning Irish, I have a number of ex-friends who no longer speak to me. I have people who whisper behind my back or send me abusive messages on social media. I'm accused of lining my own pockets, supporting the IRA, or bringing murderers onto the Newtownards Road. Now, these accusations are made, of course, by faceless, nameless people who hide behind screens and spew out their lies and falsehoods in the safety of their own homes. And sometimes the whole scene just seems so ludicrous to me. There are people who want me to hate somebody because they're of a different religion. And no, I actually have to correct myself with that, because I was at a baptism recently. It was a baptism of a baby of one of my teachers and one of my learners. She's Catholic, Irish speaker. He's an ex-loyalist paramilitary. They're now engaged, and they have a baby who's going to grow up as first language Irish. And at the baptism, Father Martin MacGill, and it was a sort of a double baptism because we had Steve Stockman from the Presbyterian Church as well. But Father Martin MacGill pointed out that actually Catholics and Protestants, of course, are not different religions. They're different branches of the same religion, the Christian religion. However, it seems to me that there's been a change in tactics in recent years. We're not vilifying people so much because of their religion. It's because of their politics now. Sinn Féin are the new monsters on the block, and the Alliance are the Lundys. Social media is the new battleground, where words rather than bullets wound and destroy lives and reputations. It's been over 20 years now since the Good Friday Agreement, and we can't even agree to what the agreement is called. For one side, it's the Belfast Agreement, and to the other, it's the Good Friday Agreement. Another example of the pettiness which prevails. So how do we move on? Well, the reality is that despite everything, we are moving on. Perhaps it's slowly, perhaps it's 2 steps forwards and 1 step back, but it is happening. The recent election results show an increase in the middle ground, with Alliance and the Green Party making major gains. However, the old guard, Sinn Féin and the DUP, continue to be the 2 big parties. And in some ways, I have to admit to feeling like a fraud standing here, because I don't have any answers. I don't have a solution that we can put into place. I don't have a magic wand that will wipe out the past and change the future. Our political, educational and social systems are divided and sectarian. And even some of the solutions set up to bring people together appear to me to focus on difference. Through my work as an Irish language provider in East Belfast, we have managed to attract a very diverse group of people of all ages from both sides of the community who sit down together, they learn together, and they laugh together. And it really isn't rocket science. It's about having shared interests and showing respect. It's about friendship and trust. It's about crossing the city and going to areas where you've never ventured before. It's about having courage and reaching out and challenging your own prejudices. When we started our project, what we didn't do was we didn't try to set up the Protestant branch of the Irish language. We weren't interested in, we're taking it back. We wanted to take our place within the Irish language community. And that's exactly what we've done. And the Irish language community have helped us, encouraged us, befriended and advised us. I'm told that the Irish language is divisive. It's offensive to unionists. But 65 to 70% of the 270 plus learners who registered for classes with us this year are from the unionist community. And they turn up week after week to grapple with this language. 4 of them will be starting university in September, all Protestants, to do an Irish language degree course. And they've spent the last 5 or 6 years with us studying the language, and they're now achieving good levels of fluency. They have made the language their own. Don't try to tell them that it belongs to Sinn Féin or that it's the language of violent republicanism, because they're not going to accept it. They're not going to swallow that. I'm presently trying to raise money to provide scholarships to send my learners to university, because I strongly believe that the more diversity that exists within the Irish language sector, the better it will be for both the language and for Northern Ireland. If we have an increasing number of people from the unionist community employed within the Irish language sector, and we have more visibility of Protestant speakers of the language, this will help to challenge the perception that the language belongs to one community or one political viewpoint. And I think that's very important. Now, I have a couple of other just very basic thoughts about other ways of maybe moving forward. We all know that integrated education helps to break down barriers, yet the numbers of integrated schools remain very small. And even though schools can now elect to become integrated, it's still quite a long and complicated process. So I believe that if money was set aside to encourage natural integration, then many schools would take up the challenge. Schools, as we know, are on very tight budgets. So if state schools and Catholic schools were encouraged to increase their numbers of pupils from the other community, and this increase was rewarded with an increase in their budget, then many schools, especially those in neutral areas and mixed areas, would make a point of trying to reach out and attract pupils from schools that maybe hadn't been their traditional feeder schools. It's about the money. Let's stop voting for politicians who adorn their election leaflets with flags and who talk about representing their community. Let's start voting. Let's start voting for politicians who want to represent all sides. I think that would be a good start. And lastly, let's recognise that we can make a difference. Let's all stop colluding with sectarianism. When someone, be it a politician, a community representative, a friend, a relative or a neighbour, when they make a sweeping negative statement about a group or an individual based on their religious background, their politics or what language they speak, let's not listen quietly. Let's speak out and challenge sectarianism whenever we come across it. Because only by changing hearts and minds can we tackle the ingrained sectarianism that has been allowed a free rein in Northern Ireland since its inception. Thank you.